going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Battlefield Project podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Rhoda, and we are the podcast for people who understand that life is a battle and only the strong will thrive. I'm joined by my good buddy here, Avram Gonzalez, who I'm going to introduce in a moment here. But before I do, quick favor to ask of anybody listening to this episode, if you get any value out of it, which I'm positive you're going to, share it with a friend or family member who you think might get some value out of it as well. The whole gist of the reason I started this podcast is basically just to create positive ripple effects out in the universe and to shine a light on my guests and let them come online and share some of the battles that they have experienced in life and then how they fought their way through those battles and why they fought their way through those battles and now the life that they're living because they had the courage and the fortitude to do so. I say in pretty much every episode, I feel like a lot of people are under the impression that successful, happy people have some butterfly rainbow reality that they get to live in and everything's kosher and perfect for them, when in reality that's very rarely the case. Every single human being has battles that they have to fight in their life, and the difference between the happy, successful people and those who are playing the victimhood and all that crap, those people have the courage and fortitude to fight, man. So I'm excited to have Avram share his story here in a minute. Before I do, let me introduce him to everybody listening. Avram is a multi-passion founder and chief strategist at Digital Harvest and the co-host of the Babies and Business podcast, which I'm definitely excited to check out because, as you know, I've got a couple of those. In 2010, Avram began his journey online with a project called Inspiraction, where he documented a year of firsts, uploading over 200 videos to YouTube, and was invited to present at TEDx on how the experience shaped his courage, confidence, and positive outlook on life. One of his most proud achievements is building an agency that requires very little of him on a day-to-day basis, and recently taking 7 weeks off with the birth of his son, Lincoln. In his spare time, he enjoys reading sci-fi, playing tabletop board games with friends, and thinking up new ways to attack everyday obstacles and create more time freedom. I love your bio because, I forgot the name of the video series that you did way back when we first connected online. I'm like, holy crap, that's it. And that was, I don't know how many years ago, like over a decade ago. And I loved watching it. And I still don't like doing videos just because I'm uncomfortable on camera for the most part. And it's just out of my comfort zone. So rewind 10 or 15 years ago when you started doing it, I was like, this dude's a fucking pioneer in the space, man. Because nobody was doing what you were doing. So kudos to you for that. And the fact that you have the very last thing you say there is, create more time freedom. I think that's it, man. I think that's the key to life. A lot of people create more revenue, and those are good goals too. But for me, I think for you as well, obviously by that statement, time freedom is everything. All the money in the world means nothing if you don't have the freedom of time to spend doing what you love and spending that money with things you're doing. So welcome, man. I'm super pumped to have you here and to hear your story, dude.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we're sharing today something that I haven't shared publicly online. I'm a little nervous about it, but excited at the same time. It's something that I spent many years in fear and shame and not being willing to share and having the courage to do so. And I thank you for the opportunity to do that. I think that's what this, part of what this podcast is all about is courage.
Absolutely, brother. My pleasure.
Right. Yep. And I shared a lot of this story with close friends, confidants for years. And that's where I felt like it was the most appropriate to do so. I felt the safest at the time. But then I started talking to more people that we're going to be talking about cults today. Right. And I was a part of a spiritual cult for about 2.5 years, something like that. And it got its insidious claws into me, my psyche. And it took probably 5+ years to really undo the programming that occurred during that time. And the more I talked to members that had left the same group that I was shortly a part of, the more I realized that my experience was not isolated. The more that I realized that what I had gone through was something that others had gone through and that I wasn't going crazy. The things that I had been experiencing, the thoughts and this push-pull that happens in the back of your head where you doubt yourself, on a very deep fundamental level, other people had experienced that as well. And it was a long journey to undo that. And I think if you're watching this right now and you're like, well, I've never been a part of a cult, or I don't know anybody like that. And we're going to break that down a little bit. What do I mean by cult? I think in this society that we're in, we are all plugged into any number of cults. It's the group think around a particular subject or point of view. And if you want to live a life of freedom, what does that mean? It means that you have to unplug on some level, and you have to find your way and recognize what your own truth is. Mm. And I think for a lot of us, we grow up just learning from other people what our truth is, and maybe not taking the time or realizing there is something to question about whether it's your belief or somebody else's and what actually works for you. Add to that the nuance of how you change and evolve as a person over time. It can get a little messy wading through and figuring out like who you actually are. Yeah. And now being in my mid 30s and having these, like my son was born this last summer. What a transformational thing in terms of how it shifts your perspective and point of view. It's like I'm having to rediscover myself all over again as a new father and as somebody who's, I feel very challenged as a new dad right now. Like there was nothing that anybody could have said to prepare me for it. I grew up an only child, and I have like zero experience with children, and my wife's the opposite. One of 11. She was a mom to like a ton of her youngest siblings, so she had all the experience coming in. She was confident, and I was just rocked to my core. But that's a different story for a different podcast, So cult, like what is a cult? I thought about it a lot. I thought about like dropping names and talking about where it was that I came from, and I thought, that's not actually helpful, right? I tell you where it was and who it was. What does that do? It's just going to have our viewers and listeners going and indulging in the drama of where it was that I came from. I think what's most important is recognizing the place I was in, where I fell into unknowing somebody else's programming. Mm-hmm. So it was me getting out of college in 2011, being young and excited about the world and being very into personal development. I was always looking for, still am, looking for more freedom, looking for more empowerment in my life, looking for tools that I could use to enact change in my life. So always been somebody who reads voraciously, listens to podcasts and things like that. And I was introduced by somebody to this spiritual modality that really caught my attention. Of all the things that I had listened to, read, or discovered, it felt so new, fresh, exciting. And when I was first introduced to some of the tools that they were sharing, I was blown away by how fast the transformation seemed to occur. Right. And so I was just bought in, hook, line, and sinker pretty quickly. Not long after that, one of the founders of that particular modality ended up coming to Denver and speaking and doing a group event. And that's when I started putting these leaders on pedestals, and I didn't realize it at the time. And the thing is like, when you make somebody greater than you, what does that also mean? It makes you think and believe that you are less than. Yep. Right. And so that creates a whole bunch of internal struggle, just that one belief. So when you play that out and you start thinking about, well, I went to all these different classes. I forked out thousands of dollars that I didn't have in seeking more truth of what I thought was, my truth. And it just created that separation and made it even greater and greater. So how can you have freedom and find your own truth when you are already making yourself less than somebody else? Yep. These are all things, by the way, zero awareness about these things when I was going through it and when I was in it. Yeah. And so I had the opportunity to travel a lot with that organization because I was so good at, at the time, I think people thought I was good at it. I never thought I was that great at it. But I was doing a lot of things with social media and video marketing, and they were very behind the times. So they wanted my expertise. They hired me. I like I said, I traveled all over the country with these people and learned from them. And I saw things that I just couldn't believe were going on behind the scenes. I remember the veil getting pulled off when I went to Costa Rica with these folks. I had come up with one mentor in that organization who was doing exceptionally well. She was getting a lot of attention. Of all the new members that came into this cult, she was responsible for 75% of all the new membership.
Oh.
So out of like 200, 300 facilitators worldwide, she was generating 75% of all of the new members worldwide. I was working with her, and the founders turned on her. They hired me. I was young. I wanted more money. And they got me with validation, right? They validated this part in me that was seeking attention, seeking love, just wanting to be recognized for something. And it was just so easy for them because they knew that I was craving it.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember sitting in this roundtable meeting, and they're like, hey, we want you to be there. And it was the first time I'd been invited to their little inner circle of like 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there, and I just couldn't believe the conversation. Basically, they were coming up with ways to, quote, destroy this other person. How can we destroy her and bring everybody with us? Basically.
Yeah.
Right. So they were threatened, but they went to such lengths that they were not only trying and attempting to do that on the physical plane, which is obvious, but on an energetic level. So it's like, this is the first time I felt like I was in real life Harry Potter or something.
Yeah.
Because I felt like these people truly were wizards of a sort, and everything starts with energy. You know, I do believe there is some level of truth in the fantasy stuff that we read about or watch on TV.
Yep.
Because we're connected energetically. And I do believe that you can send energy at people. It's the reason why you walk into a room and like you can feel somebody's mad at you.
Yep.
There are other levels to that. And there are people that are psychological and energetic manipulators of a level that you haven't even considered.
Yeah.
And so I watched how they went about destroying her. And the weird thing was crazy, actually. She ended up with cancer within 2 years of them pushing her out and dragging her name through the mud.
Yeah.
I started, and I think you might remember, not long after that experience, 2012, 2013, I started with this network marketing company. It's called Empower Network. I had such a fun time with that. And we were basically selling online education that taught people how to blog and small business owners how to use things like video marketing, email marketing in their business, get more visibility, convert more customers, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So I started blogging with this platform about the things that I'd learned in the cult, because I thought, wow, this stuff is so good. Other people should know about it.
Yeah.
What did I end up doing? I ended up recruiting a lot of members into this affiliate marketing program.
Mm-hmm.
Started getting some momentum. And then the rumors started, right? The rumors started. I stopped attending classes because I'd seen that weird stuff going on. I was like, dude, I don't want to go further into this. I'm watching them destroy this other person.
Yeah.
Like, they are literally talking about it. This isn't behind closed doors anymore.
Yeah.
And so I found out at one point that they were telling all the other members, all these people that had become my friends over time, that I was embodying anti-consciousness, right? So the whole thing was about consciousness, right? Consciousness, oneness, da da da. And now they're telling me and other people that I am doing the opposite now. Talk about, like,
yeah,
you know, knife to the chest. I felt like I was just out spreading the word. And so things just escalated very quickly. I would like wake up in the middle of the night and I could just feel people hating me from all over the world. And the weird thing about that cult is there were all these like hands-on processes and things that they would do. Again, years later, realizing this was all stuff to keep your mind engaged with that whole group. So there was no way to actually disconnect unless you stopped doing the processes, stopped running the verbal like clearings and things like that they taught. Everything was a hypnosis.
Yeah.
I didn't realize till later. Everything was about long form hypnosis trance, and that's how they get you, right? That's how you're in it and you don't even know. And that's when it all started to change for me. I was pushed to such discomfort with all the hate that I was getting. They were hosting telecalls with all the facilitators and things worldwide and talking about me. They're calling meetings talking about me, and I'm like, little old me, what am I doing? Seriously,
yeah, right?
But obviously, like, threatened, and I just thought that was so strange, but it really hurt. So every time they did that, though, what happened? I recruited more people because they came and they checked out my shit.
Yeah.
You know? So it wasn't until I fully disconnected and then essentially looked at basically the opposite. So I was all in at one point. So then I couldn't see all the bad. Then I jumped to the other side. I felt so slighted, so hurt, that I then started judging them as bad, evil, wrong. And that's when the veil started to drop. Right? So you asked about like, well, what did I do to start overcoming this? Because then the little layers started falling apart. Time was the big factor, and time away. So unplugging, it also meant getting rid of the relationships that had me tied to all that energy. So people that, I knew did care about me, but were plugged in. That wasn't good for me to continue to be around. Why? Is because I kept normalizing what abuse looked like. And I think this is sort of like the dark side of positivity. And I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs have this in common. We take every bad and turn it into good. Like that's just how, right? Yep. That's like how we're wired. Yep. But then what'll happen over time is we normalize the fucked up shit as being okay, which means that we just suppress all of this stuff that we haven't actually dealt with or come to terms with how much it affected us. So time was the big denominator for me. So unplugging, having time as the big denominator that allowed me to see some of those insidious ways that there were beliefs that I now had programmed that I had to unprogram that weren't working for me anymore. So the number one tool that I leaned on for those first years was questions. So, you read about in the Bible, ask and you shall receive. You hear about it in the law of attraction, the secret, ask and you shall receive. But a lot of people don't understand what that means and how practical that is as a tool for unfucking your life. What does it really mean? When you ask a question, you can engage the world in 3 different ways. You can engage the external world, like you're having us on a podcast. You ask a question, what happens? Boom, possibilities occur, right? So you can ask questions in the physical world and enact change. You can ask questions of yourself, which is kind of what I'm getting at with this piece right here, right now. You ask questions of yourself so that you unlock a new possibility. So you question this belief, right? I'm bad at examples on the spot like this, but is this really true for me? It's a very simple question. You see the belief come up, or you see maybe you're very triggered by something. Like, why do I feel so much resistance to what's occurring right now? Well, what is the belief that I have that's bringing up all this shit? Okay, well, now you have the belief. Now, is this really true for me? Or what parts of this are true for me? That was the other thing, right? Some of the beliefs that we take on, they're like half truths, half lies for us. Now, the third way that you can ask a question is you can ask a question to God. You can ask a question to source, right? And the answers will be revealed and provided. It doesn't always happen right away, but questions were the number one way that I started to unfuck myself. There was a short conversation I had with my bookkeeper, of all people, outside of a Starbucks like several years ago. And I had just shared with her some of the financial strain and things that I had gone through at that time. And I hadn't shared that with anybody, but of course your bookkeeper, your CPA is going to see all the gore, right? Yeah. And she said, the devil loves shame because you suffer in silence alone. Yep. And he preys on you. Yep. Right? And she said, so let this be the beginning of your journey of not feeling ashamed. There is nothing to be ashamed of here. But you can feel confident and secure sharing this type of thing with your close friends, family, and people that you know will hold that space for you. Yeah. Because the devil can't take that grip on you when everybody else knows. Yep. Right? So shame was a huge reason that I didn't share and talk about things. It was also fear of actual legal litigation. I was just intimidated by this large organization that said they were going to take me down, sending me cease and desist letters for Facebook groups that I own that had their name in it, like all this stuff. I had that, but then I had the shame. What am I going to tell my friends? The people that thought it was a little kooky and a little weird that I was doing this thing, right? The folks I'd grown up with forever. Yeah. Shame, a lot of shame, feeling very silly about my choices, right? But I started sharing those things, and that's when, the fog started to lift and I started to get control back in my life. So the time, questions, and sharing with the right people. I think that, again, entrepreneurs, what do? We just take it on ourselves. Mm-hmm. We don't need anybody's help. We got this. We are the best problem solvers on the planet. Right? That's what we do. Yep. We solve problems. So why can't we handle this? So I think that's one of the things that I learned is I have to ask for help and recognize that, maybe if I'm struggling with something for a while, a couple of days or even a couple of weeks, maybe I should ask somebody else about what I'm going through. Mm-hmm. Every single time there's some insight and there's somebody that comes to you with compassion and says you're right for feeling this way. And have you considered this? So I know the last question you have is well, what's life like now? Right? I'm much more confident in my perspective and my point of view. Yeah. Right. In our industry, you and I both run advertising agencies. There's a lot of points of view about how you should run your business, as an example. I don't give a shit about what they're saying and the way I should run my business. Yep. But before I really did, I've shared the time freedom thing with some folks here in my area. I've shared one of my goals in the business is to build a business that doesn't need me anymore. And some people look at me wow, you're lazy, right? You just want to sit around. And I'm well, you're missing it. It's not about the work ethic and stuff. You have to have that in order to accomplish the goal that I'm talking about. Big time. Right? But the bigger picture is what comes along with that. Mm-hmm. Not everybody wants to build a business the same way. And if you want to build it the way that you want to build it, you have to be willing to let other people have a different point of view. Mm-hmm. Or even judge you as less than, even though you're not. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I've taken away. I've also recognized in myself, and it was also, growing up, I got bullied a bit in middle school. And I think everybody experiences that on some level. Mm-hmm. Now being older, I realized, wow, I think that's just everybody was going through shit. Everybody was picking on everybody. And I think a lot of us have that in common. But then you see how that evolves in your adult life. And you see how, especially in business, you're in it with other people. Your clients may not be trying to take you down, but they have an opinion. They have a certain way that they want things. And I found that I would people please and the clients would get their way. And what did I get? I would get no way. Yep. I get the short end of the stick every time because I wasn't willing to stand up for myself. Yeah. When you go through an experience like I did, where you just think that you're nothing and these other people are way above you, there's a lot of manipulation involved in coming to that place. So one of the biggest things that I learned from that experience and why I think there's a blessing in everything, being manipulated so hardcore and then coming out the other side and then slowly seeing all the different ways that it occurred. I had a masterclass on manipulation because it was done to me. So what does that mean for me in my day-to-day life? I see the snakes way sooner.
Yep.
You know, the tricks are not that tricky. It's a lot harder for people to pull the wool over my eyes.
Yeah.
There's always blind spots, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not under any
Oh, yeah.
illusion.
Yep. It'll never happen. It can't happen ever again.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's going to, but you see all the basic shit so much easier. You
Yep.
see, and what I've been able to see very quickly is like, well, what's somebody's agenda here with me right now? Like, what is it
Yep.
that they want?
Yep.
You can kind of figure that out even if they're not saying it.
Yep.
A lot of times you feel the energy, the words don't match, something's up. Start asking questions.
Yep.
Oh, what do they really want? And that's been so empowering in my life to understand like where people are and what they want.
Yeah.
But that last thing is the superiority, inferiority. I touched on that a few times. It catches you all the time. You read a great book, you hear somebody with a great idea, you think, man, that's just brilliant. And then you catch yourself like putting them on that pedestal. But again, you are not less than anybody, and nobody else is greater than you. We just have different perspectives.
Yeah.
And what you are allowed to do in your life is you're allowed to walk through life like you would the grocery store. When you walk down and you got to get a can of tomato sauce, you got this brand next to this brand, do you have to put both in your cart? No. You could like take one and leave the other, but you also don't have to take one and like curse out the other one for being what you don't want. And I found that life is a lot more peaceful when you're not always battling for or against your beliefs and just being sure of yourself and okay with other people feeling the way that they feel or feeling even wrong because you feel a certain way. But you can cruise down that aisle, you can pick up what you want and leave the other stuff on the shelf. And
that's people to grab. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's like my story in a nutshell. I want to talk about this particular piece, and I just appreciate the platform to do so.
Dude, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I think this is episode 44, 45. I'd have to check. So it's a handful, and you're the second person to come on and share something that they haven't shared online. Like my other buddy was like, I've never talked about this online before, but like, I feel like this is a good spot to do it. And that means more to me than like any word. Like that just means a lot to me because like you kind of said, like, you talk to people like, what's the agenda? What do they want from me? Like, I really just like, I just want the light to be on people and for them to share what they're comfortable sharing and for that to hopefully find one or two or many other people out there listening and to create a positive ripple effect. So that means a ton to me, man. So thank you for sharing that, sharing with our audience. And as my guests talk, I kind of like make like little mental checkpoints throughout the conversation. And for you, right away, the pedestal thing that you said pretty early on in the conversation, I was like, I want to bring that up again at the end because I think that's a point. And then there's like the validation thing, like how they were able to prey on you because of validation. Also very important for people to understand like the impact and power of that, like seeking validation from people and how vulnerable it makes you. But that's secondary to the point that you made about the pedestal. And I'm glad at the end you kind of brought it all back together and kind of tied it back in a nice, pretty bow for everybody. Because you nailed it, man. Like people hearing this are like, well, I've never been in a cult. Like this isn't relevant to me. Like, no, it 100%, I would be willing to bet is relevant to every single person that hears this because, and I'll go like, you nailed it when you said you putting someone on a pedestal and being greater than you makes you less than. And like that can diminish your spark in life so much that you might not ever live your true purpose because you're spending so much time doubting yourself, hating yourself, etc., because you're holding this person or group on a pedestal. And that comes in like celebrities, politicians. I mean, it's everywhere. Like the opportunity to put someone on a pedestal that they're greater than you for whatever reason is like at every door you open is like an opportunity for you to be like, so I'm guilty. Like, you're saying that. And then at the end you're bringing it back. And I'm like, I mean, I'm 100% guilty of that. Like I've achieved certain levels of success in my life, like, with business but I put so many people on pedestals so far above me. Like, so like on a daily basis, I'm part of a group called Apex and they're all like, it's filled with some of the greatest people I've ever met.
Yep.
And inspire the shit out of me, and they force me like to lead by example and to do the work. And like, I love the group and I love the people I've connected to. But there's some people in there that are just crushing it financially, like tons of real estate investments and like doing things that I want to do at some point in my life. I'm just not doing right now. And it like, even, you know, like maybe it hasn't happened today, but I'm sure yesterday, the day before, like I see someone post something and subconsciously I'm just like, like they're way up here and like I'm still down here. And like, and I've gotten better at recognizing that and bringing myself back to it and being like, yeah, but they might look at me and be like, oh, he's got a family of 4 beautiful kids and a beautiful wife and a house, and all I have is money. And like, and they might be putting me on a pedestal and I'm putting them. So like, I see how this game works, but it's such a internal manipulative game that can crush the soul if you're not aware of what's going on. That I think that's something that like, the reason I'm saying all this is I like, people listening, be aware of that. Like that will rob you of happiness and joy. What is it? Thief or competition is the thief of joy or something like that. There's like that common saying that everyone, it's so true. Like there's no reason. And your very basic, simple metaphor of like tomato sauce is like right on point. It's like, you know, I go down, I grab brand A just because the other person comes down and grabs brand B for whatever reason they want brand B. Like that's not a competition. Like neither of us is better or worse than the other person for grabbing one thing or like having a different goal of what exactly flavor they want. Like it's so basic when you break it down like that, but it's so profound because it affects, I'd be willing to bet that affects 90% of people, 95% of people walking this earth, is that I'll call it a disease of comparing yourself to others and thinking other people are better off or better than you because they're doing something that you're not. When vice versa, like I said, like they might be looking at you and be like, well, this dude, you know, has an agency that doesn't require his work. He's way better than me, but maybe you're making this much money and they're making this much money, but they want freedom. And like, you guys are just flipping the coin and each one lands on its own side. So thanks for sharing that, dude. I think your story was in the context of a cult, which some people have a certain like stigma to or like label that they attach to it, whatever. Like that, it is what it is. Like you watch.
We got to come up. We're marketers. There's also like a little bit of clickbait involved. You know, it's gonna get somebody's attention.
Exactly.
Hello.
Someone's gonna, when I write the word cult, someone's like, I gotta see, because like is he in the woods, like doing sacrifices, like all the scary movie shit that everyone associates with cults. But really, it's as simple as putting someone on a pedestal and being manipulated by that person because you're giving them power over you. Period.
Yeah.
Like, and that can happen in a big group. It can happen one-on-one. It can happen you with yourself. Like there's the opportunity to get taken advantage of in that way. And like you said, with the validation and all those other points that if you missed it, go back and listen to this again, because it's all right there for you. But I mean, I deeply appreciate the lessons that you just put out there for people through the story that you had the courage to share, because I think it's powerful, man. I think it's applicable to every single person that's going to listen to this and hopefully share it with their friends, because like I just said 8,000 times, like everybody has these shit, like this kind of shit that they're dealing with, and it's just becoming aware of it so then you can fix it and navigate through life better, realizing like you are you, like you're your own story. You don't have to compare it with everybody else. And it's a hard lesson. Like I'm a super happy, peaceful human being, but I struggle with it. Like I struggle comparing myself to others all the time, just because I'm wired to want to be great. And I guess in some form in my head, I'm like, to be great, I have to do what everybody else that's great does that I think is great. And it's like, no, like I got to be great in my own life, doing what I want to do, serving my own purpose, and like loving the people that I love, period. It's that simple.
Well, and the funny part about that too is like, well, look what that disease has also driven you to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So like everything has, quote, good and bad.
Yeah.
Right. And that's also part of what can kind of drive you a little crazy sometimes too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me and for giving me the platform to share today. Hopefully if one person gets something out of it, then we've done our job.
That's the point, man. Where can people find you online? What platforms are you most active on if someone wants to connect with you, to be inspired by you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram more frequently now. So I'm the only Avram Gonzalez that I know. I haven't met another Avram in person, so I'm pretty easy to find if you Google my name. That's where I'm hanging out. And I started this new podcast with my wife called the Babies in Business Podcast. It's a place for entrepreneurial parents to find their own way. And it's all about just giving people options to seek different ways and methodologies to optimize their life and get more out of it. There's so many things that you can take from being a parent, and implement in your business, and vice versa. And that podcast is the ongoing exploration of that theme.
I love it, dude. Absolutely
Yeah.
love it, man. Well, my brother, man, thank you for being here. Thanks for, like I said, for 10 plus years, I've known you shining a light for people, man. Like you're one of those people that that's why I was super excited about this one, because your intent in this world, I feel like is right as the same as mine. Like you want to make people better, inspire people, give your gift of inspiration to the world, and hence your name, Inspiraction, for whatever it was so many years ago. You've been doing it, and you've been doing it really well, man. So I'm honored to be a friend.
Hey, thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, please share the show. Let's change the world for the better. I'll see you on the battlefield.